Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in, and I'm excited to be here in 2020 rolling out this new podcast talking about leadership, discussing what leadership looks like, what leadership should be, and how leadership should work. Just excited to be putting this out there for anyone who's seeking some type of just different perspective on experiences, on advice, on situations, on suggestions. And please feel free that if you have any suggestions or any material or anything that you want to provide input on, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than glad to, try to make some type of effort and accommodation so that we can connect and have a discussion over the leadership material. And so, just a brief background on how this show is going to be designed. What I've done is I've taken some interviews with friends, family, coworkers, former coworkers, and pretty much had a discussion of what they felt leadership looked like, what they felt leadership should be, and the best leadership they've been in, and some situations where what leadership failed them or was not present. And so I've taken those stories and I am now going back and anchoring them back to what the books say. And by the books, I mean from HBR to The Way of the Warrior to No Hard Feelings and various other books. And if you are familiar with these books and have started reading them or you're currently reading them, this is a great opportunity to provide some type of insight on how you feel about those books and their chapters. And these won't be the only books we are going to use here in this podcast. We're going to be talking about Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and so on and so forth. So I'm really excited. I really look forward to understanding more about leadership. Leadership is always something that we need to maintain. You never fully arrive as a leader because a leader has different hats and different components that need to be retuned and refined and always adjusted. And so that's what this is an exploration and a dive and a discovery of leadership in different areas at different times and different aspects. And so with that being said, if I don't discuss something about leadership, it's not to say that's not relevant or not important, but it's an area that what I discuss is where I feel was most relevant and had the most impact on the employee and the situation or the team or the overall objective of a project or a company. And so this is where then I ask you if you feel like where you could add in some input on that. More than glad to accept and talk about it and include you in on this conversation, because I know a lot of times when I was trying to really gain a great understanding of how to make a decision, whether it was should I take a position, should I make a move, should I embark on this new adventure, how to go about it. I would always seek others who have been down those paths, and maybe they weren't they were not similar at all, but the situation maybe lent itself to where they could find some common ground and were able to provide me some advice and suggestions. And there was many times when they were flat out, I can't help you because I've never experienced that. I've never been down that road. And so with that being said, I know there's every situation is very unique and very specific and very tailored to the person and the individual at this moment in time or at that moment in time. And so I hope that through these discussions you can find some type of common ground to be able to assess and use it to help you make a more clear decision, or have a better understanding without having to experience some of these things. So ultimately, I hope you all enjoy what you listen to. Please share it if possible. Reach out to me. I would love to hear from you all. I'm excited to be doing this. I will work on producing one a week. There's a lot of material that I was able to come across. There's a lot of people who I got to talk to. There was just so many great conversations that I had. And so, with that being said, I want to start this one off, and we're going to be talking about what's called the eye rolling. That's the title of this short story. This from this interview that I conducted. And so, to give you some background, the individual who shared this with me, and I'm using individual there, he, I won't use names, only to protect the identity of the individuals who shared this with me. And so, with that being said, the individual who shared this with me was talking about how there were a lot of deadlines in a position that he worked in, and he knew that his supervisor wasn't very approachable, and that's already a red flag for a supervisor, because as a supervisor you're in a leadership role, and for an employee to feel that sense of not being able to come in and talk to you or just be able to approach you already sets that boundary that distorts communication because of being reluctant. Now, I also offer the suggestion that you got to build that little leather skin and just go in there and take care of it. You have to ask a question, approach, knock on the door harder, with respect and right timing. Set up a time, set up a meeting. But the fact that you're already having to work with that situation just makes it difficult and unpleasant. Maybe not difficult, just unpleasant. And so that's what we're going to be discussing, is the situation where he felt, or no, he didn't feel, he needed supplies. And so, knowing what he knew, he still embarked and still went ahead and said, I'm going to go ask, which is good for him. So the story goes like this. I needed office supplies to help with work duties. So naturally, I decided that I was going to go ask my superior, knowing that my superior was not very approachable. As I approached the supervisor's door, which by the way was wide open, I noticed that my superior was working with their head down. Okay, so and I'm going off. This is me just talking out loud here. So this leadership is now really focused on their work. The door's wide open, but the fact that you have your head down and you're working probably isn't the best time to go in there and knock. But if you feel like you need what you need and there's no better time, then take the opportunity. And the worst that's going to happen is please come back in 5 minutes, and you come back in 5 minutes and it's taken care of. Okay, so I gently knocked on the door. The supervisor lifted their head up. After recognizing it was me, this person proceeded to dramatically roll their eyes at me. It was obvious that the supervisor was frustrated and did not care for my presence. So that right there is a big indicator of a bad situation where a leader cannot handle the stress level. Because if the leader is looking up and dramatically rolling their eyes, talk about the message that's being conveyed there by just a simple action of rolling your eyes. So in the interview, I asked, and I didn't put it in here as part of it, but I asked, um, I asked him, "Did you say anything?" And the only thing he said was that he knocked after he got the eye rolls. He apologized and walked back. And then I asked, "Well, did you get called back in?" It's like, "No." Did they ever call you back in to talk about why you were knocking in the first place? No. So there may be more around that story, but we're taking just that snapshot right there where the employee knocks and the supervisor looks up and rolls the eyes in dramatic fashion and lets it be known, "You're not welcome here. Please leave." And it was obvious that the supervisor was frustrated. Well, being in a supervisor position and leadership role, it's very vital to always maintain that level head mentality, that sound mind, because people look up to you and people are expecting for answers to be provided. And when you put yourself in a predicament where you are now expressing your disapproval of someone knocking on your door, then you need to sit back and reevaluate, well, where did I go wrong on this? Because there are so many unfavorable situations that can arise from that. Talk about creating a fracture, maybe not a huge crack, but just even a hairline fracture in the foundation of that relationship. Because ultimately, you want a team that is 100% or close to 100% of being able to trust and have a strong rapport. But if your employee who's coming to your door and knocking at your door is walking away feeling bad forever knocking because you can't handle your stress, then the perception of being unapproachable, and now you're rolling your eyes, that's not going to create a culture. That's not going to create a work environment where people are going to feel inspired and gravitate to wanting to work that much harder. No, it's going to have the opposite effect. Now, it may not happen through one experience, but do that plenty of times, it's going to get old and eventually it's going to catch up. And the fact that there's already a notion that you're not approachable and this is happening and this happened now doesn't help, and it only leads to building that camaraderie. It only leads to deteriorating that camaraderie that should be instead being nurtured and built. What should it have looked like? Okay, so if you are stressed and your employee knocks on the door, you have your head down, and this is me talking to the leadership. You take a deep breath and you compose yourself and you look up, and maybe not with a big smile, but you look up and you greet them and you invite them in. And you let them know that you're there to listen to them, because leadership should be available. Remember, leadership and the many hats that it wears has to have emotional intelligence. And that is one of the components that is very vital for leadership. And that's what we're going to segue right into. So, what we're going to talk about here comes from HBR, which is Harvard Business Review, on leadership. And it's from the chapter that's called or titled, "What Makes a Leader?" And going back to, the supervisor needs to develop their emotional intelligence skills here. They need to have self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. All of these that I just mentioned are drawn from the